A Grammy-winning producer challenged Amy Winehouse to prove she could do pop music. What happened next changed how everyone in that London studio understood talent. It was March 2007, Abbey Road Studios, Studio 2, the same room where the Beatles recorded most of their catalog. Amy Winehouse was there working on what would become Back to Black, already 3 months into sessions that were supposed to wrap weeks earlier. Mark Ronson was producing, but that afternoon a different figure sat behind the mixing board. David Kahn, the American producer who'd worked with Paul McCartney, the Bangles, and most recently, had just finished engineering Britney Spears' latest album. He was in London for meetings, heard Amy was recording, and asked to observe. Amy sat in the corner of the control room, nursing a cup of tea that had gone cold an hour ago. She wore the same black dress she'd worn the day before, her beehive slightly askew, dark eyeliner smudged but somehow still perfect. She wasn't performing for anyone, just existing in the space, watching the technical conversations happening around her music. Khan had been listening to playbacks for the past hour. Rehab, You Know I'm No Good, Back to Black. Raw, emotional, rooted in 60s soul and Motown with a distinctly British twist. Impressive, but predictable in his view. She's got a voice, Khan said to Ronson during a break, loud enough for Amy to hear. But it's very niche, very retro. Jazz standards, soul throwbacks. Does she do anything contemporary? Amy didn't react. She rarely did when people discussed her like she wasn't there. Contemporary how? Ronson asked, defensive of his artist. Pop music, Khan said simply. Radio music, something that doesn't sound like it was recorded in 1965. Can she adapt to modern production? Modern melodies? Or is she locked into this vintage thing? The room got quiet. The engineers stopped adjusting levels. The session musicians, who'd been chatting near the piano, turned to listen. Amy looked up from her teacup, met Khan's eyes for a moment, then looked away. No anger, no defensiveness, just acknowledgement that someone had drawn a line in the sand. I mean, Khan continued, warming to his subject, retro soul is fine for a certain market. But can she sing something that was actually written this decade? Something with a contemporary pop structure? Or would she sound lost? Ronson was about to respond when Amy stood up. She walked past both producers without a word, pushed through the door that separated the control room from the live room, and sat down at the piano. Her fingers found the keys automatically. Not a warm-up, not a scale, a melody. Simple, electronic sounding when played on acoustic piano, but unmistakable. Britney Spears, Toxic, the song that had dominated radio 3 years earlier. Pure pop confection, manufactured in Sweden, processed through auto-tune and digital effects until it sounded more machine than human, the antithesis of everything Amy Winehouse represented. Amy played the opening riff once through, then started singing. Baby, can't you see I'm calling? But it wasn't the Britney version. Amy's voice, unprocessed, unfiltered, poured the song's lyrics through her own emotional register. The silly pop hook became something else entirely. A confession, a plea, a warning. She sang it slower than the original. Let the melody breathe. Found spaces in the lyrics that Britney's version had rushed through. Made the pre-chorus build with genuine tension instead of manufactured excitement. The control room was silent. Khan had stopped mid-conversation. Ronson was leaning forward in his chair. Amy reached the chorus and something extraordinary happened. She took Britney's processed, digitized, I'm addicted to you. Don't you know that you're toxic? And made it sound like a woman genuinely struggling with addiction, genuinely poisoned by love, genuinely unable to escape something that was destroying her. Her voice cracked slightly on toxic, not from technical limitation, but from emotional weight. She made a pop song about dancing, and desire sound like a blues about dependency and despair. The bridge came, and Amy did something no one expected. She stopped playing the original melody entirely and improvised. Her fingers found jazz chords that shouldn't have worked with a Swedish pop song, but somehow did. Minor ninths, diminished sevenths, the kind of complex harmonies that belonged in smoky clubs, not pop radio. She scattered for a few bars, her voice dancing around the original melody line like a conversation with herself. The Swedish producers had written the bridge as an aggressive build-up, all synthesizers and electronic beats. Amy turned it into a moment of quiet desperation, her voice exploring the spaces between notes, showing that she understood the song's structure well enough to deconstruct it in real time. In the control room, one of the session musicians whispered to another, "She's rewriting it live." The other nodded, mesmerized. Amy's improvisation wasn't showing off. It was searching, finding the emotional weight that the original version had glossed over with production tricks. She made Toxic sound like it was written by someone who understood addiction from the inside. Then she returned to the final chorus, but softer now, more vulnerable, like someone admitting something they'd kept secret. The big pop finish became an intimate confession. When she finished, she sat at the piano bench for a moment, hands resting on the keys. The last note hung in the air, reverberating through the legendary studio space. Abbey Road's acoustic design meant every sound had weight, had presence. Amy's version of Toxic seemed to linger in the room's DNA, joining the echoes of everything that had been recorded there before. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of recognition, of recalibration. Everyone in that room was reassessing what they thought they knew about pop music, about Amy Winehouse, about the difference between performance and revelation. She stood up slowly, adjusted her dress, and walked back into the control room. No drama, no acknowledgement of what had just happened. Like she'd simply answered a question that had been asked. The silence stretched. Amy poured herself another cup of tea from the pot on the side table, tested its temperature, made a face, and sat back down in her corner. Connie stared at the mixing board. His mouth was slightly open. In his 20-year career, he'd worked with technically perfect singers, classically trained vocalists, pop stars who could hit every note with mathematical precision. But what Amy had just done wasn't about technique. It was about emotional archaeology. She'd excavated feelings from a song he thought he knew completely. The other people in the room seemed frozen. The session musicians looked at each other with raised eyebrows. The engineers had stopped pretending to work. Even Mark Ronson, who'd seen Amy's interpretive genius many times before, looked stunned. But Amy seemed unaware of the impact she'd made. She moved through the control room like she was alone, going through her normal post-performance routine. Tea, magazine, corner chair. As if transforming a pop song into a blues meditation was just another Tuesday afternoon. "That was," he started, then stopped. Amy didn't look at him. She opened a magazine that had been sitting on the table, began flipping through it like nothing had happened. "How did you—" Connie tried again. Amy glanced up from the magazine. "Know the song?" "No," Connie said. "How did you know what it meant?" Amy looked confused by the question. "I mean," Connie continued, "Toxic is a dance song. It's about attraction, about being drawn to someone dangerous, surface-level stuff. But what you just sang, that was about addiction, real addiction, about being poisoned by something you can't stop wanting." Amy shrugged. "Same thing, isn't it?" Kane was quiet for a long moment. "I produced that record," he said finally. Amy looked up from her magazine. "Yeah? I spent 3 months on that song. We had the best writers, the best musicians, the most expensive studio time. We crafted every sound, every effect, every vocal layer. Britney did maybe 50 takes of the lead vocal." Amy waited. "And in 5 minutes, you just showed me what the song was actually about, what it should have sounded like, what I missed completely." Amy closed the magazine, not dismissively, but like she was giving him her attention now. "I thought," Kane continued, "that she couldn't do pop music. I thought she was limited to retro stuff because that's all I'd heard. But what she just did, that wasn't covering a pop song. That was translating it, finding its emotional core, and rebuilding it from there." Ronson, who'd been silent, finally spoke. "That's what she does with everything. Takes it apart, finds what it's really saying, puts it back together in her voice." Khan nodded slowly. "I've been doing this for 20 years. I thought I understood the difference between technical skill and artistry. But I just watched someone take a song I produced and show me depths in it I never knew existed." Amy opened her magazine again, but didn't really read it. She was listening. "Can I ask you something?" Kane said to her. Amy looked up. When you were singing that, were you thinking about the original version? Trying to improve it or change it? Amy considered the question. No, she said finally. I was just singing it how I hear it. How do you hear it? Amy was quiet for a moment, considering the question with the same seriousness she brought to everything musical. Like someone trying to explain why they keep going back to something that hurts them, even when they know better. When she sang, "You Know I'm No Good," it wasn't self-deprecation. It was self-awareness so brutal, it became a form of honesty most people couldn't handle. During a break, he pulled Ronson aside, needing to articulate what he was processing. I came here thinking she was talented but limited, Khan admitted, his voice low and urgent. I thought she was stuck in the past, couldn't adapt to contemporary music. I was completely wrong. She's not stuck anywhere. She's just hearing things the rest of us miss. She gets that a lot, Ronson said. People hear the retro influences and think that's all she can do. It's not about the influences, Khan realized. It's about emotional intelligence. She hears what songs are really saying, underneath all the production and posturing. That's not a style thing. That's a gift thing. 6 months later, Back to Black was released and became one of the best-selling albums of the decade. Amy Winehouse became a global phenomenon, but also a cautionary tale about the price of translating pain into art. Connie followed her career from a distance. He watched her struggle with addiction, watched the media circus that surrounded her personal life, watched her become the very thing she'd sung about in that impromptu version of Toxic, someone poisoned by something she couldn't escape. In interviews, he'd occasionally mention that afternoon at Abbey Road. Amy Winehouse taught me the difference between covering a song and understanding it, he'd say. Most artists perform songs. Amy inhabited them. When Amy died in July 2011, Connie was in Los Angeles, working on another album with another artist. He got the news via text message during a session break. He sat in his car in the studio parking lot for 20 minutes, thinking about that afternoon in London. How Amy had taken a manufactured pop song and found something real in it. How she'd done it without effort, without explanation, like breathing. In a 2017 interview with Sound on Sound magazine, Khan was asked about the most memorable moment of his career. I was working with Amy Winehouse once, he said. I challenged her to sing pop music, thinking she couldn't adapt beyond her retro style. She sat down and performed Toxic, a song I'd produced, and in 5 minutes showed me more about that song than I'd learned in 3 months of making it. The interviewer asked what made it special. She didn't try to improve the song or show off her technique, Khan explained. She just listened to what it was actually saying and sang that truth. Most producers spend years learning how to hear what's really in a song. Amy did it naturally. She heard feelings that other people missed. Do you think she knew how good she was? Khan was quiet for a moment. I think she knew music was the only place where she could tell the truth completely. And I think that's why it killed her. When you hear that deeply, when you feel that much, when you translate pain that directly, there's a cost. The story of that afternoon became part of Amy Winehouse legend. Not the dramatic tabloid version of her life, but the quieter truth about her gift. How she could take any song from any era, in any style, and find its emotional center. How she made other artists and producers reconsider their own work. David Kahn had challenged Amy Winehouse to prove she could do pop music. Instead, she'd shown him that all music, underneath the production and the marketing and the genre labels, was the same thing. People trying to say something true about what it feels like to be alive. And some people, like Amy, heard that truth more clearly than others. Even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. That afternoon at Abbey Road became a watershed moment for everyone who witnessed it. The session musicians would tell the story for years. The engineers would remember it as the day they understood the difference between technical perfection and artistic truth. Mark Ronson would later say it was one of the moments that defined Amy's genius for him. But for Connie, it was something more personal. It was the day he learned that his assumptions about artistry had been backwards. He'd thought versatility meant being able to adapt your style to different genres. Amy showed him that real versatility meant being able to find the human core in any song, regardless of its surface presentation. Years later, when people asked him about the most talented artist he'd ever worked with, Khan would hesitate before answering. Not because he didn't know, but because he wasn't sure he could explain what made Amy different. Most singers perform songs, he'd say eventually. Amy inhabited them. She found exactly what they were really about and sang that truth, even when uncomfortable. If this story of artistic truth and emotional intelligence moved you, remember that real talent isn't about fitting into categories. It's about finding the human core in everything and making it impossible to ignore. Amy Winehouse could do that with any song, in any style, because she understood that music is ultimately about feelings, not formulas. The producer who challenged her to sing pop learned that day what many others discovered way too late. Amy Winehouse wasn't limited by her influences. Her influences were limited by how much truth they could handle.